I think I'll just explain a little bit about our two panelists here because I think they bring a wealth of experience, which will be very useful and beneficial for the group here. So Mary, who is the current Director of Cloud Services for CPF Singapore, which, by the way, manages $500 billion of domestic assets, right? So a lot of our money goes there. And also, as Brett mentioned, right, one of the world's most advanced retirement savings and pension systems in the world, is also a pioneer in digital transformation, right? So as you will hear a lot from her later, right, some of the strategies they've employed, right, to just keep CPF at the forefront, right, I think is really eye-opening. She has had a pretty extensive career within CPF and the IT industry here in general as well. Anywhere from maintaining, the resiliency of all the CPF systems, running tech transformation, initiatives, outsourcing and insourcing back. So huge implications to run skill sets and training, as well as managing APIs, data analytics initiatives, and now cloud services, right? So a round of applause for Mary, please. And Iolaire, who I think also gets the award for best dressed and certainly the most dapper person in the room, is also no stranger to an extensive experience in the industry. Apart from being the head of cloud infrastructure at the Jockey Club, and as Brett mentioned, one of the top 10 charitable donors in the world, single largest taxpayer in Hong Kong, and think about that in the context of casinos already existing there, right? So that's a huge. But also both CPF and Hong Kong Jockey Club have massive societal contributions as well, yeah? And he's had massive experience owning strategy for cloud services, API management, running infrastructure as code across both public and data centers, and across banking, cloud providers, and e-commerce, right? So round of applause for Iolaire as well. So the first question of the day, which I'm sure is top of mind for a lot of folks as well. As Brett mentioned, CPF just celebrated 70 years. That's technically 10 years before Singapore gained independence, right? So we are celebrating SG 60 this year. And the Hong Kong Jockey Club, not to be outdone, is 140 years, right? These are really long-standing, stoic organizations. I'm really excited to find out what their journey to the cloud and modernization of infrastructure and applications has been. What are the challenges they have faced? What are some of the learnings? And with that, I'll pose the first question to Iolaire. All right, so the first question is, as you look back at some of the experiences you've had and the initiatives that the Hong Kong Jockey Club has had, what are some of the learnings and legacy challenges you faced?
Sure. So as you can imagine, with a place which is 140 years old, there's a wealth of things hidden behind the scenes, under covers, in cupboards, and all sorts of things you can pop up when you try to say, let's do some modernization. I think one of the first things is why you're doing a modernization, and what do you want to gain from it? There's a degree of cost saving or get your end of life and you need to get back into support and these kind of things. But that's not very exciting or very transformative to the business. This is more like a cost of IT. And yes, you do that, but it's like eating your vegetables. It doesn't actually, help you a lot day to day. So I think we had a few false starts as well. So we were sold on a dream by someone who was a previous CIO, but perhaps better at sales and execution. And so when I joined into the club around in 2024, there was a loss of trust in transformation of IT and in the club's ability to execute as well, particularly in this area. So the question then became, how can we rebuild that trust? What things can we do to make a difference on a small scale and then expand outwards over time? So the focus we had was primarily around the parts which are already quite modern. So the digital channels that we offered and so on, they were still being managed in a very ITIL kind of a way, service management, downtimes and so on. But there was a way that didn't require much change in order to make them very much more self-service, to improve the speed of delivery, because they're already container-based systems. They're already using stuff that's similar to public cloud. And so this was our key to get into that, open it up, and then show that, yes, infrastructure as code can reduce defects. Infrastructure as code allows you to test changes before you make the change. You know, a lot of the problems is we'd have change failure, or we'd try to do many changes at once. Because of that, if you do, say, 2,000 changes in one downtime, if you have an issue afterwards, well, which one caused the issue? Not easy to figure that out. So moving to change more often, counterintuitively, actually reduced our risk of change. Because you do it very often, you build a strength to do it. It becomes ordinary. Whereas when you try to do too many at once, it becomes a high-risk kind of feature. So that was the key. So walk before you run, I guess. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, crawl, walk, and run, right? And then learning the process, iteratively improve, and then move on to the next, yeah? Mary, you've been in CPF for a fair amount of time, so you've probably seen a lot of these changes, probably a lot of ups and downs as well. What has your journey has been like, yeah?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a little bit of advertisement for CPF 70. As you know, CPF is 10 years older than Singapore. And for those of you who are curious to know why that was the case, you could download our digital ebook, from our website, and you can find some details about it. It also has some interesting stories about CPF's modernization journey. And also that, the first IBM mainframe was actually for CPF. And they actually had to bring it in through the so-called window because it couldn't get into the lift. So that was an interesting snippet there. Yeah, so SM Lee actually, he actually was a guest of honor, and he actually helped to launch our commemorative book. And he said the CPF story is the Singapore story. And it is actually one of self-reliance, ingenuity, and constant adaptation. And I think throughout today, a lot of the stories that we're hearing, is really around all these three attributes, right? So same for CPF in terms of our cloud journey. Coincidentally, it was also then PM Lee who actually announced that Singapore government will go into commercial cloud. And it was, he phrased it as it was a necessity and not really a choice because of the way that the technology was moving. And as long as we continued to stay on premise, we couldn't just keep up with the change, the pace, the velocity of the technology. So that was when he started this. Well, for CPF, we went into the cloud in 2021, where we launched our CPF website there. And we, early on, when we were deciding the strategy for us to move into it, we decided that we couldn't basically hold back the kind of the velocity and innovation and all that for the team that was going to move into the cloud, because they should just do everything that was native, cloud native. But at the same time, we actually needed to ensure that we secure our systems of records, which was actually on the mainframe. So what we decided to do was then to build certain routes and to harden them and to only allow the data to flow through the internal API hubs and the file transfer hubs that we built. And then we just monitor it in terms of cyber threats and also in terms of anomalies. And through that, then we focus our attention to making sure that only data could only be through those areas. And then basically that was how we started our journey.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, I do have some follow-on questions, particularly in terms of balance, achieving balance with legacy infrastructure, as well as keeping a strong enough security posture, which we'll handle a bit later. Question back to you, Iolaire, is from our understanding of the infrastructure footprint you have to manage is pretty extensive. Yeah, you have a lot of mission-critical applications running on data centers, on-prem. At the same time, I think you're also leading your sector in application modernization, next-generation services, even leveraging AI verification, right, to prevent fraud as well. So that comes with a pretty extensive portfolio of infrastructure, which is very hybrid. So as you have approached the overall cloud strategy, right, we'll be interested to find out what kind of trade-offs, right, on-prem, single cloud, multi-cloud, and how have you just approached that, yeah?
Sure. So within Hong Kong, we're part of China, and ultimately the US is not that friendly under the current administration to what China's up to. So we always have a feeling, or basically we won't be able to have a card to play to say if we had to exit from support from, say, Amazon or Azure, which are current clouds, what would be our option that's not that? So essentially that leads you to two options. One is public Chinese cloud, and the second is bring stuff back on-prem, where we have physical access to things. So our approach has been, in both scenarios though, we still want to retain our infrastructure as code, we still want to stay shift left. Like I don't want to leave the cloud and then sit back in our data center and start doing ITIL-based service management again. So wherever we're going, we take along the demand that we have a Terraform provider available and that we can do self-service, particularly for development environments. There's so many of them in the way we operate today. And having the self-service of golden templates, of security approved designs, and ensuring that each of our licensing arrangements for the tools we use can support that approach has been pretty key there. So it's not to say we're always going with, say, SaaS tooling. Where we do use SaaS, we ensure that we can get the data back out. It's a JSON format, or it's open source, but has been enhanced with enterprise support. But you always maintain that ability to get the data back out without too much pain. So we're choosing to rely on third parties, but we don't have a dependency that is very, very critical.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, so I think a team that has been talked about the last one hour or so has been, there's a lot of tool sprawl, but what you really want is to try to standardize as best as possible while maintaining velocity and get economies of scale around it.
Yeah, that plus the need for stuff potentially to run tenanted, especially for SaaS. When you go into mainland China, you can't always rely on the SLA for network access. It might not work this week. It might work last week. Many of the international providers also don't put an endpoint into mainland China because of the complexities of operating like that, or the need to maybe license the IP to actually be there. So then we have our own complexities, which we need to incur, like private links back to the world through the firewall and so on, which you can do. But again, we're taking complexity on a situation where it should be SaaS. So it should be easier, but somehow it became more difficult.
Got it. So fortunately that most of your main betting systems are still on-prem then.
They are,
yeah.
And we don't plan to offer any betting in China.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's enough there. I'd like to pivot over to you, Mary. I think quite a few of the audience members here mentioned skills, talent, right? Given the fact that you led through an insourcing phase into CPF as well, right? It'll be good to hear from you how you approach that, right? I mean, combination of acquisition from the market, building talent from within. Yeah, we'll be interested to hear your perspective. Yeah.
Well, I think, first of all, is that although there potentially are a lot of talents out there, but there are two aspects of this, which is actually around can an organization like CPF, which pay top dollar for talent, so most of the time we can't. But at the same time, you still need to have a team that's able to produce something that it's world class. So how do we then approach this? So in 2023, well, within our IT cluster, we actually did a strategic rethink of our talent strategy, and we approached it from two angles. One is along the escalating cost of IT manpower, and then the skills and the talent gap. So to address the escalating IT costs, then we looked at whether we could actually move out of Singapore and then go into like overseas, the offshore development centers. So we started to do that a couple of years ago, and increasingly more aggressive over the last 1 to 2 years. So today we actually have offshore development centers in India, in Chennai, Bangalore, in Cebu, Philippines, as well as in Hanoi, in Vietnam. So these are, and we're trying to grow the talent there, and we are also trying to make them, give them certain incentives to actually anchor them to be loyal to, to continue our projects. So we actually came up with certain incentive schemes to actually like reward them so that they will actually do more kind of thing. So I think that was something that was quite interesting from our outsourcing team for that's looking after the offshore. The other one is regarding internally. We also look at, instead of just looking at the skills, we actually decided to focus on a holistic competency framework. And so for this part, what we're looking at is typically when someone starts off in his career, it is what you call a vertical. So actually he develops a strong technical skill in one area, and that is what we call the I. And then you say, okay, after a while you need to develop a T structure, so you have to have certain horizontal skills and also some management and stakeholder and things like that, all the soft skills. Then we decided that that wasn't enough. We need to have a pie, which means you need another leg to stand on, so you need 2 legs. So then we said, okay, we need a pie-shaped, to develop a person holistically. And to do that, then we came out with, in fact, it is, we're still at into it, but we have actually already come up with a list of the profiles, the job functions, and the competencies that we need to develop. There were some common competencies that cut across different functions. And incidentally, infra as code is one of them.
Thank you.
Even logging and matrices and management and all that. So we actually abstracted them to certain competencies so that you're not, it's not just, whether you use HashiCorp, you use AWS or Azure, but that competency will allow you to deliver the outcomes that's needed. And whenever there's a new technology that comes up, basically you just apply the competency to it, and it's very easy to pick up the skills. Anyway, with AI now, English is the common language, right?
Yeah. I think it was Alex, right? YAML, basically that's English, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. I think security, right? I'd like to spend the next question on security. And that is something that's clearly top of mind. We've been using a lot of terms in terms of, the security continuum, shifting left in security, security being, a critical component within the whole software development lifecycle. So, question to you, Iolaire, right, is what proactive unified approaches or any shifting left policies, right, have you implemented to move kind from a reactive posture to more of a unified posture?
Yeah, so when I came in, so put it as a background, the Jockey Club's in an interesting position because we're not actually regulated in any sense like a bank is, for example. We're carrying a huge wallet, actually, and we do payment systems, and people pay money in, and we pay money out, and so on. But somehow we don't fall under PCI because we don't take credit. We're not a bank, we're not an insurance provider, but we have a massive system which really represents, bank-sized activities. So the first thing coming in was to establish a baseline to say, okay, if we're not actually held to a particular thing by an external entity, we need to apply our own standard, a gold standard.
So minus any top-down compliance or regulator, right? Then you need to apply best practices,
Best practice in the behavior, because ultimately we are a target like any other entity. We have data that's important to people, sensitive data, who's betting on what. I think, could be a source of concern or interest for people who would rather not have that turn up. Right. And also for our charities, we're storing information about people with mental health issues, about children, old folks. We have many different focuses around the culture in Hong Kong. And so again, protecting this is super important. For us, we established our directive controls just from best practice, things like the CIS benchmarks. You can find out sets of controls you can follow. Also, establishing privacy by design within our structures of our applications. So what data do you need to carry out a process? You mask the data if it's not needed. You don't collect the data unless you have a purpose. So establishing that as a directive sense, from then you're down into the policies, which could be policy as code, and then into the detective stuff. So it's already live, but you caught it and you can fix it. Yeah. Responsive is really in the worst state. So something bad happened and you're in incident territory. Right. So of course we want to catch this early. So strong focus on policies and embedding them into the pipeline has been what's worked with us so far.
Perfect, thank you. And it'll be good to get the public sector regulated view from you, Mary, right? Where I'm pretty sure there's a lot of compliance requirements already in place, yeah?
So I think the thing is to actually look at how you could actually solve a problem and still be within the regulations. So it's about how innovative you could get. So when one story was during when COVID-19 hit, and then we had a mega modernization project that was ongoing at the time, and at that point in time, there was this restriction where there was none of the foreign developers who come into Singapore. So so basically there was this huge talent crunch. The project deadline didn't shift, but nobody could come in. And so how do we try to solve that problem? So we then looked at how we could then use a commercially available virtual desktop that was from AWS, but what that was internet facing. So it didn't fit a lot the model of how a regulated industry and that the code cannot get out of Singapore and things like that. And that was before GovTech came out with Seed and the tech pass and things like that. So we had to think about how could we engineer a solution that then allowed us to have a hardened container that the developers from overseas could actually get in there but not take anything out from it. So we actually then use other types of SaaS solutions like Okta, and we also use Prisma Cloud. So basically they're all SaaS solutions. We just packaged them together, and then we came up with a solution, and that allowed us to open up even access to our mainframe for developers who are overseas to actually access. So that was one of the examples of how, basically, everybody here is engineering background, so every time you have a problem, they can all solve the problems.
All right, excellent. Just mindful of time here, so I kind of want to maybe leave the two of you with a final question, which is what I call a crystal ball question, right? As you plan for the future, how are you architecting for higher scalability, resilience, and innovation? What emerging trends or technologies are you watching? Yeah. So, Iolaire, first over to you.
I mean, obviously, for things like scalability and resilience, public cloud is very effective for that, especially for our business, because most of the time there isn't actually a horse race on. And so when there is a horse race on, we'll have 100,000 bets in, say, 5 minutes. The rest of the time, nothing's happening. And so cloud addresses that. I think what will be interesting for future is really personalizing the experience. So it's really not an infrastructure question, but the enabling technologies which allow you to offer a very personal experience to people who are interacting with our charities, people who are interacting as members, horse owners, members of the public. And each one of them has to have an experience which makes them want to engage further or actually enjoy the time. I would say, as an entity, this is a different problem versus CPF because you've got no choice, right? But as an entity, we're in a battle, not with other providers or illegal bettors or whoever, but it's really attention. So everything is in a battle for attention for anything else you could possibly be doing with your time. And so it's important that we don't get in the way of people to enjoy themselves or make use of our services, that we can essentially be invisible. And we just provide that experience, very personal. I think that is going to be a big differentiator for who succeeds or fails regarding what people want to do with their time.
So there's a lot of stuff that happens beneath the surface, right? Just priming for burstable traffic on the cloud side, just making sure, infrastructure is provisioned proactively, right? All that stuff underpins.
Fully event-driven.
Yeah, correct.
A lot of stuff needs to be in place for that to happen.
That's right. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And over to you, Mary.
Yeah, I think for in terms of technology, there's always new technology that comes up every day. So whenever we look at technology, we look at the operational sustainability of it. We look at how well does it integrate with the rest of the processes, and how much friction does it cause. So I think what earlier when the trust bank and all that, when the whole issue around standardization, I think that resonated with me, because I think the thing is, as you scale, it's very difficult to get everyone to do it the same thing, and then how do you make sure that nobody breaks anything, and that that there's no security gaps inside your whole infrastructure and all, right? So like I say, the whole day two part is actually very important. So when we look at any kind of technology, it's always, the day two is always important.
Excellent. All right. I think we are at the top of the hour. So thank you very much. Round of applause for our panelists, please. And I will strongly recommend all of you just reaching out to two of them during the networking session and picking their brains on a lot of other stuff. Thank you very much. Yeah.